Episode 21 begins at a concert by the Holograms, which is for rock musicians against poverty. And what better way for the Holograms to perform the concert as usual with Rock and Rolls Forever? And why is that? It's because it was dedicated to a guy named Bobby Bailey. We're about to meet him in just a minute, who wrote the song from way back in the 50s. Anyway, after the song came to an end, someone from the audience say, "Hey, the song's all wrong." And that's when he was stopped by the guard when he tries to approach the band itself. Anyway, in the dressing room, that's when the stranger who later introduced himself as Bobby Bailey, and he explained to the holograms how he and his bandmates had written the song long ago, back in the 50s. Then Bobby also explained to the girls how he and his bandmates had invented rock and roll since when Emmett Benton, who was Jericho and Kimber's late dad when he was very young at that time. Then Bobby Bailey said in his case it should be done the right way, not your way. Anyway, Kimber demanded to know what good of a guitar is if it's not plugged in at all. Well, I'll show you that's even better than that. I have an acoustic guitar that helps with that. So, anyway, after the girls and Bobby had left the dressing room, it's off to the apartment complex where Bobby lives. But by the time that everyone arrived to the building to where Bobby lives, there's a problem. First of all, there's a condemned sign on the front. So Bobby even said that this is the third time that this has happened. And now Jim wants to know why was the building being condemned all of a sudden. Bobby said, "Are you kidding me? This building's in great shape and should never have been knocked down." Anyway, Bobby even explained to the bandmates that he's not living by himself, the tenants live there too. But even better, himself, Bobby that is, and the rest of the tenants took very good care of it to make sure it stays restored and in very good shape. But then Bobby told the holograms and Jim that here comes the bad news. Somebody wants the building tore down really bad and has an excuse in doing it. And we know who that someone is. None other than Eric Raymond himself. Now, why would Eric want to tear down the building so bad? Desperately? Well, I'll explain it. And here's Eric and the Misfits now inside the crane truck. And he has just knocked down the building that's about a couple blocks away. Anyway, Eric had just explained to the Misfits why the buildings need to be knocked down. It's because he said he wanted to build the biggest record company in the East Coast. Back with the holograms and Jim, they now entered Bobby Bailey's apartment. Now you can tell that the holograms were fascinated by the place. There's a lot of memorabilia, there's Bobby Bailey's guitar and all the gold records and everything. Bobby said something that's even better. He said that himself and the Tornadoes used to record the songs right here to where he's living in now. So back with Eric and the mistress who made the last stop in front of the building to where Bobby Bailey's living in now and so are the tenants. So possessed of the mistress was asking, "What are we stopping here for?" "Well, this is the last building that's left," Eric explains. So Eric wants to know from the mistress if they would help him. "Well, what's the favor in return?" Possess said. "Well, you get the portion of the record production itself," Eric said. "Well, what are we waiting for?" And that's when Possess grabbed the controls of the wrecking ball from the crane. But before Possess of the Misfits could do that, Eric says, "Wait a minute, there's people inside still." But Possess doesn't listen. And so the wrecking ball suddenly got out of control thanks to Possess of the Misfits. And what it did next is that it knocked over the police cart that was parked there and the fire hydrant. Next thing you know, it knocked out the roof on the crane truck. While Jim Holograms and, of course, Bobby Bailey were still inside of the apartment, they heard a commotion coming from outside, so they ran out to see what's going on. By the time that they did, the roof of the crane truck got ripped in half because of the wrecking ball that got out of control. Luckily for Eric and the mistress, they managed to get out of the crane truck. Well, good news for Bobby Bailey, by the time he turned off the engine of the crane truck, the wrecking ball stopped, and then he ran over to the holograms. Kimber of the hologram seems very impressed that a guy his age should move that fast. So Bobby asked a question. "You don't think a guy myself could pull this off, do you?" Before Kimber can make a compliment, that's when Bobby Bean said, "Oh, don't worry about it." When later across the street, when Eric saw what had happened and that a female officer approached him, she decided to charge him with destruction of public property. And on top of that, the female officer decided to charge Eric with bribery after he asked her would $50 cover it. Anyway, the holograms are busy painting and restoring the old building when all of a sudden the mistress came out of nowhere to create some commotion. And what better way for them to do is with the song Take a High Jack. And it was during that song, it's the Misfits message to have the tenants and Bobby Billy to, how you say, move on out of there. After the song came to an end, well, let's just say the tenants of Bobby's building are not exactly happy about it. So, meanwhile, on Eric's yacht, when the Misfits came back, that's when Possessed says, well, creating a cosmic commotion may be nice, but it's not going to get the tenants out any quick. So Eric told the Misfits just relax and not to worry about it because this is just the beginning. So the Misfits, however, are very impatient. So, as ruthless as Eric is, he told the ladies that, as always, I have a plan to get rid of these tenants for good, forever. And what better way to do a favor with that kind of job is with the two of the men, Mickey and Torch. So later that night, Torch and Mickey were on a mission. What Torch did was that he went downstairs to rupture a water pipe while Mickey's doing the power lines. Anyway, the holograms and Bobby Bailey were busy walking back. That was until something happened to the power lines that distracted Bobby Bailey and the holograms. And they knew who was the person that's behind all of it, none other than Mickey himself. So after Kimber saved Bobby Bailey, good thing she did, and that's when Mickey climbs down from the power pole, and that's when the rest of the holograms chase after him. But they soon realized that he got away. Back with Kimber, she was thanked by Bobby for saving his life. Don't worry about it, Kimber says. You would have done the same. So the next morning, Kimber went to pick up some court documents and some archives. And that's when Jerica, Asha, and Sheena went to pick her up. But before that could happen, Asha and Sheena are wondering what's going on with Kimber because there was something off with her. What do you mean? Jerica asks. Well, Asha explains. I mean, think about it. Kimber is doing 8 hours of research right there. However, Jerica seems to agree with Asha that there is something going on with Kimber. But then suddenly Kimber shows up minutes later to join up with her friends and got in the car. After Kimber gets in the car, she told her friends, guess what? I got some good news. She says, I just found out a way how to save Bobby's apartment. So back at Bobby's apartment, after Bobby lets in Kimber and her friends, she says, I got some good news. I just found a way how to save your apartment. So Kimber explained to Bobby that according to the real estate records, that since 1958, this building that you're living in now is considered residential. So what about it? Bobby asked. So, in other words, what Kimber's telling Bobby that a factory should not be built in any way. Bobby Bailey, after hearing this good news, he seemed impressed. Meanwhile, the holograms went to see Eric and boarded his yacht. And by the time they arrived, they told Eric that first of all, he's not getting away with it. Second of all, that factories should not be built on a residential area in any way. Well, that and the zoning laws themselves. Then Eric, who was surprised by this comment from Jim, he says, well, if that's true, then the four of you are trespassing and asked them to leave. Well, gladly, Jim says, and got off the yacht and along with her friends. After the holograms left the yacht, that's when Eric told Torch and Mickey that this battle's only the beginning and it isn't over yet. Later, Eric went to visit Carl in his limousine, and he's the City Hall councilman. Now, Carl wants to know from Eric what kind of favor he wants from him. Well, Eric has something that'll tie Carl with a suitcase full of money to say, I have a building that needs to be knocked down as if you could do a job for me, and Carl agrees to do just that. Back at Bobby Bailey's apartment, Bobby Bailey and the holograms were watching the news on TV, and let's just say it's not happy news at all. And of course, Kimber just told Bobby after hearing this bad news, she said, we can't quit now. Well, even so, Bobby says, but there is a rule. You can't fight City Hall, and that's indeed true in his case. Of course, Jim tries to cheer up. Kimber says, well, at least we tried. Even Alja and Sheena were disappointed to hear this news, and they said, well, it looks like Eric wins this time. Then Kimber goes on to speak in her case by asking a question, what are you all talking about? You made it sound like it's over already before it could begin. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not giving up. So even though Kimber said that she isn't sure about what her idea is, but she knows she has to come up with something quick. And so Kimber rushes off to do something about it. But in the meantime, Jim does a documentary with her friend Video to tell them about the rock and roll history and etc. to anyone who will watch TV and hear on the radio, to anybody who will pay attention. And now, according to what Jim, she's disappointed to hear the terrible news of how rock and roll and its history is about to be doomed. Even Video, who's Jim's best friend, tries to cheer up Jim and her bandmates the best way she knew how. And of course, Jim says, well, with the documentary, people who would pay attention may hear about it. So back at the apartment complex, here comes Eric and the Misfits with a bunch of bulldozers to tell everyone, including all the tenants that were in there, that they're running out of time. And that is when one of the tenants says, well, you had to go through us first. But then all of a sudden, just when things are about to look bad, here comes Kimber, but she's not alone. Mr. Wilton from the Historical Society is with her. And that's when Kimber told Eric when he approached her, she says, here, read it and weep. And then Eric looks at the document very carefully because he now just realized that thanks to Mr. Wellington, the building that Bobby's living now, along with the rest of the tenants, is now contributed as the National Monument. That means not even Eric himself can touch it. So you know what this means. Thanks to Kimber, with a little help from Mr. Wellington on the way, the building is saved, along with Bobby's apartment with all the memorabilia and its rock and roll history. As for Eric, he is once again disgusted and humiliated, and so he left. So Bobby really thanked Kimber for not only saving the day, well, after all, she deserved most of the credit because she's the one who saved the building itself and its rock and roll history. So Bobby wants to know from Kimber and her bandmates if he can do a favor from them. It's to perform together at the concert. And so Kimber agreed and said, that's a great idea. So that's what Jim, the Holograms, and Bobby did. And what better way to do it to dedicate for music lovers from both the old generation and the new is with the song Let's Not Forget the Past. After the song came to an end, well, you could say both the Holograms and Bobby learned to collaborate. And that ends episode 21.